All right, we now have comic books and books to talk about. No books necessarily, but we do have Batman, and a very interesting movie franchise is getting a comic book adaptation that really makes no sense. So let's get into all of this news. Welcome, nerds, to the comic books and book news for the week. This is where we talk about all things comic books and literature related. So if there's a new book coming out, we're not going to get into individual arcs necessarily, unless there's some sort of like major publisher-wide effects that are going to be related to said arc. We don't really get into individual arcs or individual issues. We just talk about the broader news at large. So without any further ado, let's talk about some comic books and possibly some books as well. So first up, we have Batman Off-World is a new Batman book. This marks the return of Jason Aaron to the DC fold. He'll be returning to write a new Batman miniseries, which is Off-World. Which will follow young Dark Knight making his first journey into the cosmos, which is pretty freaking awesome. The series will be illustrated by Doug Mahnke and Jamie Mendoza and will launch Tuesday, November 21st. The art for this, going off of the little bit that they've released for previews, is pretty dang cool. Very intrigued by this. I'm honestly not super well versed in Jason Aaron, so this is the first time he's written for DC since, I believe, 2008, which is significant. So hopefully there's a reason they brought back somebody from that time period, because, you know, comics were still selling at that point. But that's all we got really for that. So let's talk now about Basic Instinct is getting a comic. Really? Basic Instinct. The Sharon Stone movie from the 90s, Basic Instinct, is getting a comic book? Why? It's Sumerian Comics has announced that they will be teaming with artist Vanesa Del Rey, and the author, I don't know who's writing this. Someone at Sumerian Records. For whatever reason, it wasn't, I don't think it was in the article even, but the artist is Vanesa Del Rey. Maybe she's writing it as well, I don't know. But the Basic Instinct, what an interesting choice. This is where I hand it off to you and say, Qua? Are you interested in such a thing? Is there a reading audience for this? Because I think that this is kind of part of the larger conversation of the issues with the comic book industry as it stands right now, is they're making books for an audience that doesn't exist. Maybe there is an audience for this book specifically. I don't know who that would be. I don't know any of the community that would read a movie adaptation of this style. Like, obviously the adaptation of William Gibson's Alien 3, that makes a lot of sense because that's kind of a big thing in the community. And certain other things, the Berserk thing, I guess, is kind of in reverse because they're making it into a movie now. And there have been a number of other examples of this, but like an erotic thriller is getting, like, I just don't understand this choice. And then this is going to be, when it doesn't sell any issues, this is going to be another example of, well, we did this really awesome book and nobody read it, so people just don't want to read comic books, and that's kind of mislabeling the issue, much like the superhero movie fatigue over in the movies. That's not the actual issue. Just because it looks like that to somebody who doesn't understand the community, it does not mean that they are right. Really what this is comic books and movies alike. It's just not stories that anyone in the active, very active community wants to be a part of. They don't want to see the movies that are coming out in this genre because they're not geared towards them, and they don't want to read comic books like this because they're not geared towards them. It doesn't have to be superheroes and spandex. There's plenty of other comic book stuff there, but I just really don't see how this has an audience big enough to justify making a comic book adaptation of a movie that came out in 1993 and is notable for one really big thing, right? Alright, so that's what we got for regular S news. There is no other subsections. So let's talk suggestions in comic books and books. And this week's suggestion is another book suggestion. Ender's Game, Orson Scott Card, the classic from 1985. This book gave me faith in modern science fiction when I read it. I believe I was junior, sophomore or so in high school. Just this, and between this and William Gibson, I was like, oh, so things that have been written since Isaac Asimov died are actually good. And yeah, just the struggle of Ender and all of the other Ender books in the series, Ender's Shadow being my second favorite to Ender's Game, the original, are just stellar. Say what you will about Orson Scott Card's personal politics and how he conducts himself in his everyday life, separate the art from the artist and appreciate the amazingness that is the Ender's series. That is your book suggestion for the week. Once again, nerds, this is just the comic books and books section from the Week in Nerddom, which is the much longer video that gets posted over on the main channel, youtube.com/generallynerdy or @generallynerdy, however you gotta find it. That's the main channel. You get the entire, usually around about an hour-long video there that goes into other topics as well, TV, movies, rumors, etc., etc. Go check that out. Before we leave you, though, always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here.